Hi, guys. It's Mr. Miller here, and this is my first note, if you want to call it that, for Unit 3, which is our international law unit. So far, we've been considering law mainly from a Canadian perspective, sometimes an American perspective, but this time we're going to look at kind of legal philosophies from a global perspective. And the first two kind of concepts of how we're going to analyze global law or international law is ethical imperialism versus cultural relativism. So, ethical imperialism is a philosophy that certain universal truths or values are standard across all cultures. If something is wrong in one culture, it is wrong in all cultures. So, this dichotomy is black and white. There is no middle ground, there is no gray. If something's right, it's legal, it's moral. If something is wrong, it's illegal, it's immoral. So, something like murder. Again, we have all sorts of laws concerning murder in Canada, and almost every other jurisdiction around the world has nearly identical laws. They may not use the words manslaughter, second degree murder, first degree murder, but you can definitely find a similar sounding law in almost every culture, in almost every jurisdiction around the world, even when we consider historical perspectives. Again, murder is often the first law or first rule in a lot of religious texts. If we think about Mosaic law, the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill is one of the first laws according to that religious text. If we look even further back to the Code of Hammurabi, the idea of an eye for an eye, again, uh, laws concerning retribution. Again, solving murder with murder, but it is definitely made clear in that text that murder is not legal. Theft, the idea of taking something that is not yours. Again, thou shalt not steal. And kind of a more recent problem, child prostitution. Again, the difference we consider when looking at the choice of an adult versus the choices of a child. In no culture around the world, we hope that the idea of child prostitution, a child selling sexual services, would ever be tolerated. Okay, so these are all ideas that we would think of as being ethically imperial. But the problem with ethical imperialism is that second word in the definition, imperialism. And when people often critique ethical imperialism, they are critiquing the idea that is often Western cultures imposing their values on other nations. So the nations of Europe, the nations of North America, imposing what they believe is right and wrong on the rest of the world. And a lot of people feel this is a carryover of colonialism, where the nations of the West that treated nations in Africa and Asia poorly during the colonial period are still trying to impact their laws just indirectly now. And that brings us to our second topic, cultural relativism, a view of culture based on the idea that a culture's different values should be respected, as the ethics of one culture are not better than another. So sometimes we abbreviate this to is all is acceptable as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. So again, if no one is being hurt, again, no one should care. So some topics we often consider when we're thinking about cultural relativism is the standard age of drinking or when we allow people to consume alcohol around the world. In the province of Ontario, it's the age of 19. But even within Canada, the age will change. In Quebec and Manitoba, it's 18. If you've ever traveled to the United States, you would happen to know that their age that in which they allow drinking is age 21. If you have traveled to Europe or other parts of the world, you'll find that there actually isn't a set drinking age. It's just more of a cultural consideration. They don't want children drinking, but there is no law strictly on the books that forbids it in some countries. And certain nations make distinctions between different types of spirits. Wine is okay because maybe that's a part of a religious ceremony if you're practicing Roman Catholic. Again, in certain kind of Eastern European nations, Germany specifically, they take a difference or in perspective when it comes from beer to hard liquor. And even when you talk to people within Canada, you'll find different perspectives of when they allow their own children to consume alcohol. Some parents will say, well, it's okay if it's within my presence or if I buy it and give it to him. While other parents, like my own, would say, absolutely not, never buy your own when you turn 19. Corporal punishment of children. Again, in Canada and in certain perspectives, a lot of people would believe that physical punishment or corporal punishment of children is child abuse. It is against the law. But in certain other nations, they believe this is a part of properly parenting your child. Again, spanking or again being slapped over the back of the head or again hit with a wooden spoon or a shoe is just a common part of childhood, not even thought twice about. And I know some of my friends who came from a Latin American background, they credit corporal punishment with being successful. Again, I was told it kept them in line. Again, I don't agree with that, but often corporal punishment of children is an idea that people believe is culturally relativism. If a child learns through corporal punishment, maybe that's a good thing. I don't agree, but some people do. And lastly, adult prostitution. Again, we definitely make and want to make the distinction clear between child prostitution and adult prostitution because we believe a child cannot consider the ramifications long term or short term of engaging in that. But an adult maybe could. We had an entire formal debate concerning this topic. If and it's uh, someone is fully aware they are an adult of the ramifications of engaging in prostitution and all the positive and negatives that come from that, should they be allowed to do it if they are a fully consenting adult and the person purchasing the services is a fully consenting adult? Again, some people believe it's an entirely consent based question, and some people believe it should still be banned because of the possible negative ramifications of, again, prostitution, again, things like uh, sex trafficking, drug addiction, STIs, and such. And adult prostitution is definitely considered a culturally kind of relativist idea because in Canada there is a very much legal gray area where the sex act is legal, but the purchasing of services is the criminal part. In most of the United States, prostitution is criminalized, except for places like Nevada and in Western Europe, places like the Netherlands and Germany, they have fully legalized and regulated prostitution industries. And what I want to bring up now is the idea of marriage laws. Uh, Typically in Canada, uh, and marriage is basically between a man and a woman and a woman, a man and a man, two individuals. Again, this is the idea of monogamy. But in other parts of the world and in different faiths, they practice the idea of polygamy, where again, in most circumstances, there is one male member of the relationship and multiple female members of the relationship. So, if you've ever watched a TLC show called Sister Wives, you know what I mean. Again, this is also fairly common but not regular in Islamic kind of religious practices. But in Canada, the idea of polygamy, again, a formal marriage between more than two people, is criminalized. So I have section 293, part one of the criminal code, which is everyone who practices or enters into or any manner agrees or consents to practice to enter to any form of polygamy or any kind of conjugal union with more than one person at the same time, whether or not is recognized by law as a binding form of marriage, uh, or anyone who actually, again, helps with that marriage. So, guilty of a crime, and it's an indictable offense, and with a sentence not exceeding 5 years. So, in Canada, this is definitely a crime, but polygamy and people in polygamous marriages do exist because of their religious faith. So, this is another situation where criminal code is conflicting with potentially someone's charter rights, and it's the right to practice their faith. And again, as much as we consider this, again, very unusual and very irregular in Canada, it does exist. And it is taking place right now in a place called Bountiful, British Columbia. Bountiful, again, is a small, very small community in the Rockies, and it is home to a breakaway sect of the Mormon Church, sometimes called the Church of Latter day Saints, which still is practicing polygamous and allows polygamous relationships and marriages. So, this documentary, which I'll have you guys watch next, is about the community of Bountiful and the man who leads it, a man named Winston Blackmore. And it very much tackles the idea of ethical imperialism, the idea that some ideas, some rules, there is no black and white, there's a right and wrong side of the perspective, definitely come into conflict with the culturally relativist ideas of, again, marriage and religious practice. Where, and I'm sure people who are part of this bountiful polygamous community would argue that their relationships, their marriages are composed of nothing but consenting adults who, again, freely agree to the relationships, and they believe no one is being hurt or harmed by them. Again, you'll have to make up your mind after, again, watching this documentary. Okay, guys. Again, how you take this note is entirely up to you. If you want to copy out exactly what I've written into your notes, that's fine. If you want to abbreviate it, that's fine. If you just want to have this documentary, this note video kind of bookmark so you can watch it again, that's up to you too. Okay, guys, have a good one.